Sergio Ramos. Sergio Ramos wasn't just a defender. He was a master practitioner of the dark arts. While undeniably one of the greatest centre-backs in history, he operated with a calculated cynicism that transformed fouling into a strategic weapon. His objective wasn't merely to win the ball, but to physically break the opponent's spirit and frequently their body. His methodology was precise. It wasn't always the highlight reel tackle. It was the subtle elbow in an aerial duel, the tactical trip during a counterattack, and the ability to provoke a reaction while feigning innocence. Ramos treated the rulebook as a loose suggestion, holding the record for the most red cards in the 21st century. The statistical evidence is damning. He has been sent off 28 times in his club career. Yet, the defining moment of his villainy occurred in the 2018 Champions League final. In a single match, he executed a judo-style takedown on Mohamed Salah, dislocating the forward's shoulder, and moments later, delivered a clandestine elbow to the head of goalkeeper Luis Suárez, causing a concussion. Liverpool's season imploded, Real Madrid won, and Ramos lifted the trophy without a shred of remorse. He is the ultimate winner at all costs, proving that to be a legend, you don't have to be liked. You just have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Roy Keane. To the faithful, he was the heartbeat of the team. To everyone else, he was a sociopath in boots. Roy Keane didn't just dominate the midfield, he annexed it through fear. He possessed a terrifying aura, a man who weaponized his own anger to psychologically disintegrate opponents before a ball was even kicked. His methodology was cold, calculated intimidation. While he could pass with precision, his trademark was the reducer, a heavy early tackle designed to let the opponent know that possession would come at a physical price. He didn't play on the edge. He erased the line completely, utilising verbal abuse and studs-up challenges to assert absolute dominance. The definitive act of malice was his premeditated assault on Ulf Inge Haaland. In April 2001, during the Manchester derby, Keane sought retribution against the Norwegian, who years prior had accused Keane of feigning injury. Keane waited patiently. When the moment arrived, he didn't tackle for the ball. He tried to amputate the limb. He drove his studs high into Haaland's right knee with sickening force, standing over the writhing player to scream profanities before walking off. He later admitted in his autobiography that he waited long enough and hit him hard, confirming the intent. That tackle earned him a £150,000 fine and a 5-game ban, but the legacy was sealed. Keane proved that for him, the football pitch was merely a venue for settling blood feuds. Kevin Muscat. Kevin Muscat sits alone in the pantheon of football villains. He wasn't merely a tough tackler or a fierce competitor. By many accounts, he was a thug in a jersey. While others played aggressively to win, Muscat played with a genuine, discernible intent to endanger careers. During his era, he was widely considered the most hated man in British football. His style was criminal. Muscat specialised in the reducer, going over the ball with studs raised, deliberately aiming for shins, knees and ankles. He didn't want possession. He wanted to ensure his opponent left the pitch on a stretcher. The evidence of his brutality is horrifying. In 1998, his tackle on Charlton's Matty Holmes was so vicious that Holmes required 4 operations and skin grafts to save his leg from amputation. Holmes sued Muscat for the tackle marking, the first time a player successfully sued an opponent for a deliberate foul, and settled for £250,000 in damages, with total costs hitting £750,000. Later in his career, he ended the season of Adrian Zara with a challenge so severe it was described as assault. Muscat isn't an honourable mention. He's the definition of dirty, a player who forced the legal system to step onto the football pitch because the referees couldn't stop him. Joey Barton. Joey Barton was a walking incendiary device, a player whose talent was constantly overshadowed by a fuse that was far too short. He wasn't just an enforcer, he was a violent variable, capable of detonating at any moment, playing with a chip on his shoulder the size of a stadium. His methodology was undisciplined chaos. Where others utilised tactical fouls, Barton resorted to thuggery. He engaged in off-the-ball assaults, famously stubbing out cigars in teammates' eyes at parties and instigating on-field brawls. He seemed unable to distinguish the line between aggression and assault. The definitive meltdown occurred on the final day of the 2011/12 season against Manchester City. Fighting against relegation, Barton completely lost his composure. First, he elbowed Carlos Tevez in the throat, earning a red card. But he wasn't finished. As he was marched off, he kneeled Sergio Aguero in the hamstring and attempted to headbutt Vincent Kompany, trying to take as many opponents down with him as possible. It was a disgraceful exit that nearly cost City the title and QPR their survival. The FA responded with a staggering 12-match ban. Barton remains the archetype of the self-destructive villain, a man who possessed Premier League quality but Sunday League discipline. Vinnie Jones wasn't a footballer in the traditional sense. He was a bouncer who seemingly found himself on a grass pitch by accident. As the ringleader of the notorious Crazy Gang, he antagonised the English elite with a brand of violence that bordered on criminal activity. He didn't rely on technical skill, he relied on the threat of imminent pain. Jones utilised the dark arts as a primary tactic. His repertoire included grabbing testicles, most famously Paul Gascoigne's raking studs down calves, and two-footed lunges that disregarded both gravity and safety. He holds the record for the fastest yellow card in history, 3 seconds, for reducing Dane Whitehouse, a move of pure tactical cynicism. However, the most damning indictment of his brutality occurred in a 1986 match against Tottenham, involving Gary Stevens. Jones launched a tackle so high and ferocious that it effectively shattered Stevens' knee. It wasn't just a foul, it was a career-ending event. Stevens never fully recovered, retiring shortly after due to the extensive damage. Jones showed zero remorse, viewing the casualty as collateral damage in Wimbledon's war against possession football. Jones remains the poster boy for the hardman era, proving that sheer intimidation could keep a small club in the top flight provided they were willing to break a few legs. Luis Suárez. Luis Suárez was a paradox, a striker capable of scoring the most beautiful goals in Premier League history, yet plagued by a red mist that turned him into a liability. He didn't just bend the rules, he cannibalised them. His villainy was unique. It wasn't limited to late tackles. It encompassed psychological warfare, diving, racial abuse allegations, and, most disturbingly, biting. He weaponised his teeth, turning the pitch into a playground brawl where absolutely nothing was off limits. The undeniable evidence arrived in April 2013 against Chelsea. Inside the penalty area, frustrated by Branislav Ivanovic's tight marking, Suarez snapped. He grabbed the defender's arm and sank his teeth into the flesh in a moment of primal madness. Ivanovic displayed the bite marks to the referee, but Suarez escaped immediate punishment to score a late equaliser, adding insult to injury. The FA subsequently reviewed the footage and handed down a massive 10-match ban, condemning the violent conduct as deplorable. Suarez left England as arguably its most talented villain, the Vampire of Merseyside, a player whose legacy is permanently scarred by his inability to control the beast within. Diego Costa. Diego Costa wasn't just a striker. He was a psychological experiment gone wrong. He played football like a street brawl in a dusty favela, operating with a malicious cunning that infuriated an entire continent. He didn't just want to score goals, he wanted to get you sent off while doing it. His methodology was the art of the wind-up. He weaponised the dark arts of irritation, subtle scratches on the neck, hidden pinches, snot rockets, and constant, whispering, verbal abuse. He would antagonise defenders until they snapped, then throw his hands up in mock innocence, playing the victim while his opponents saw red. The definitive proof of his dark genius was a masterclass in manipulation against Arsenal in September 2015. Costa liquidated Laurent Koscielny with 2 hands to the face, then chest bumped him to the ground. When Gabriel Paulista intervened, Costa scratched his neck and whispered aggressively until Gabriel lashed out with a soft kick. Costa detonated, screaming for the referee. Gabriel was sent off. Costa stayed on. It was a heist. The FA later reviewed the footage, banned Costa for 3 games for violent conduct, and rescinded Gabriel's card. But the damage was done. Costa was the Premier League's ultimate pantomime villain, proving that you don't need to be the strongest player on the pitch if you are the most manipulative. Nigel de Jong. They called him the lawn mower, not because he covered ground, but because he cut people down. Nigel de Jong was the destroyer in Manchester City's midfield engine, a player who interpreted the ball as an optional objective. He played with a low centre of gravity and a high tolerance for inflicting pain. His game was built on excessive force. He didn't slide, he launched. His tackles were reducers designed to break momentum and metatarsals alike. He played with studs turning 50-50 challenges into 80-20 situations where the opponent took 80% of the damage. The receipt of his brutality arrived in October 2010 against Newcastle United. In the opening minutes, de Jong lunged into Hatem Ben Arfa with a scissor tackle that was sickening to behold. His trailing leg swept through, and his leading leg snapped Ben Arfa's tibia and fibula. The sound of the break was audible. Ben Arfa needed oxygen on the pitch and missed nearly a year of football. Incredibly, the referee didn't even award a free kick. De Jong was later dropped by the Dutch national team as punishment, a rare condemnation from his own federation. De Jong was the anchor of City's rise, but his legacy is stained. He was a mercenary of the midfield who treated opponents' limbs as collateral damage. Marco Materazzi. The Matrix was a chaotic blend of world-class defending and unhinged aggression. Marco Materazzi was a supreme provocateur, a tall, imposing figure who utilised his physical stature to bully forwards and his sharp tongue to dismantle their composure. His dark arts were both psychological and physical. He mastered the off-the-ball assault, a discreet punch to the ribs, or a tug of the hair when the linesman wasn't looking. He was an expert at baiting opponents into reactions that would get them expelled, all while wearing a look of utter confusion. While the Zidane headbutt remains his global headline, his club villainy peaked in a Champions League bout against Villarreal in 2006. In a duel with Juan Pablo Sorin, Materazzi didn't bother with the ball. As a cross came in, he delivered a deliberate, stinging elbow to Sorin's face, splitting the Argentine's eyebrow open and leaving him bloodied on the turf. It was calculated brutality. Sorin later called him a coward, sparking a tunnel brawl after the match where Materazzi allegedly struck him again. Materazzi retired as a World Cup winner and a treble winner, but his reputation is indelible. He was the man you loved to have on your team and the man you prayed would get arrested if he was on the other. Duncan Ferguson. Big Dunk was a mythic figure of Scottish violence. He was less a centre forward and more a brawler who occasionally headed a football. With a physique carved out of granite and a temper that could flare in milliseconds, he terrified defences across Britain. His methodology was pure intimidation. He utilised his elbows as weapons in aerial duels, accidentally smashing defenders' faces while jumping. He didn't dive, he stood his ground and dared you to run into him. When the red mist descended, he didn't just foul, he sought to hurt. The definitive moment of his career is unique in football history. It led to a prison sentence. In a 1994 match against Wraith Rovers, Ferguson lost control. With the ball nowhere near him, he grabbed Jock McStay and delivered a savage headbutt to the defender's face. It was an assault, plain and simple. While the referee missed it, the police didn't. He was charged with assault and served 44 days in Barlinnie prison, marking a rare instance where a British player was jailed for an on-field incident. Ferguson remains a cult hero for his passion, but a villain for his lack of control, holding the Premier League record for red cards, 8, a testament to a career played in the red zone of rage. Andoni Goicoechea, they called him the Butcher of Bilbao, a moniker he didn't just earn, he curated it. Goicoechea was a defender who viewed the penalty area as a slaughterhouse. He possessed a primitive ruthlessness, patrolling the back line with a singular intent to maim the opposition's most gifted creators. His methodology was blunt force trauma. He didn't use the dark arts of subtlety. He used the sledgehammer of violence. His tackles were late, high, and designed to shatter bone. He famously preserved the boot he used to destroy opponents in a glass case in his living room, a trophy of his brutality. The definitive act of barbarism resulted in the most infamous injury in La Liga history. In September 1983, against Barcelona, Goicoechea targeted Diego Maradona. There was no attempt to play the ball. Goicoechea lunged from behind, snapping the Argentine's ankle with a sickening crack. The tackle shattered Maradona's ankle in 3 places, threatening his entire career, and the sound of the break silenced the Camp Nou. It was an assault that sparked a riot in the return fixture months later. He received an 18-game ban, later reduced, but the message was sent. Goicoechea remains the ultimate villain of Spanish football, proving that talent could be stopped not by tactics, but by breaking the legs of the genius who possessed it. Eric Cantona. King Eric was a genius, but he was a monarch who ruled with a volatile temper. He played with his collar up and his chest out, a figure of arrogance who believed he was untouchable. He didn't just play the game, he hovered above it until the red mist dragged him down into the gutter. His methodology was retaliatory violence. Cantona didn't start fights, but he finished them with shocking disproportion. If you kicked him, he wouldn't complain to the referee. He would stamp on your chest. He possessed a hair-trigger temper that turned minor scuffles into national scandals. The undeniable evidence of his rage arrived on January 25th, 1995, at Selhurst Park, after being sent off for a petulant kick on Richard Shaw. Cantona was walking to the tunnel when Crystal Palace fan Matthew Simmons hurled abuse. Cantona didn't ignore it. He launched himself over the advertising hoardings, delivering a kung fu kick to the fan's chest, followed by a flurry of punches. It was a moment of pure cinematic madness. The FA banned him for 9 months, and he faced criminal assault charges, receiving a community service order. Cantona's legacy is complex, but that night defined his dark side. He was the only player audacious enough to attack the stands, blurring the line between footballer and street fighter. El Hadji Diouf. El Hadji Diouf wasn't a hard man. He was a pestilence. He is arguably the most universally loathed man to ever play in the Premier League. He didn't possess the physicality of a tyrant, so he weaponized disrespect. He was a provocateur who thrived on making opponents and his own teammates despise him. His methodology was vile. While others used elbows, Diouf used bodily fluids. He specialised in the lowest form of the dark arts. Spitting, he would taunt, dive and abuse, but his signature move was expectorating on opponents and fans to incite a reaction. The definitive evidence of his disgrace arrived in November 2004 against Portsmouth. After a tussle with Arjan Desiu, the Portsmouth captain laughed off Diouf's dive. Diouf responded by spitting a mouthful of drink directly into Desiu's face. It was a repulsive act that shocked even the hardened pros. Desiu later stated he would have preferred a punch to the face than the degradation of that moment. The FA banned him for 3 matches, and his own manager, Sam Allardyce, considered sending him to a sports psychologist. Diouf left a legacy of toxicity. He earned no villain nickname because he earned no respect. He was simply a disgrace who proved that you can be rich and famous and still have zero class. Graeme Souness. Before he was a pundit in a suit, Graeme Souness was the most terrifying midfielder in Europe. He was a sophisticated thug, a player who could thread a 40-yard pass or break a jaw with equal efficiency. He didn't just win the midfield battle, he occupied it like a hostile army. His methodology was preemptive violence. Souness believed in hitting the opposition's enforcer first and harder. His studs were permanently sharpened, utilising high tackles that raked down shins to establish immediate superiority. He played with a licence to injure that would likely see him arrested in the modern game. The defining act of brutality occurred in a 1986 match against Steaua Bucharest. Souness targeted Gheorghe Rotariu. It wasn't a tackle. It was an amputation attempt. Souness planted his studs directly into Rotariu's groin and thigh, stripping the skin and muscle. The sound was gruesome. The referee, incredibly, awarded only a yellow card. Souness defined the era of the hard man. He was a winner, undeniably, but he achieved it by ensuring his opponents were too terrified to tackle him back. He was the velvet glove encasing an iron fist. Oliver Kahn. Der Titan was less a human being and more a furious accumulation of testosterone and rage. Oliver Kahn dominated the Bundesliga not just with elite saves, but with sheer, unadulterated terror. He didn't command his box, he held it hostage. His methodology was primal intimidation. Kahn would sprint out of his goal to scream in the faces of his own defenders, grab opponents by the neck, and physically shove strikers who dared to enter his orbit. He was a goalkeeper who seemed personally insulted by every shot he faced. The evidence of his madness is plentiful. In a match against Borussia Dortmund in 1999, Kahn channeled Mike Tyson. First, he attempted a kung fu kick on Stefan Chapuisat. Moments later, he got close to Heiko Herrlich and actually nibbled on the striker's neck, a vampire-like attempt to bite his opponent. In another match against Hansa Rostock, he punched the ball into the net with both fists for a goal, earning a sending off for pure lunacy. Kahn retired as a legend, but his villainy was built on unhinged aggression. He was a man who played every second as if his life, and yours, depended on it. Antonio Rudiger. Antonio Rudiger is a villain for the meme generation. A defender who combines world-class athleticism with unhinged eccentricity. He plays football like he's auditioning for a horror movie, utilising crazy eyes and bizarre physical antics to unsettle strikers. He isn't just a defender, he is a menacing nuisance. His methodology is pure, calculated chaos. Rudiger bites, pinches, and screams. He mocks opponents' running styles and engages in unnecessary wrestling matches during corners. He weaponises his physical frame to bully forwards, often leaving a trailing leg or a subtle elbow to remind them he is there. The definitive proof of his villainy occurred during the Euro 2020 group stage against France. Rudiger was caught on camera appearing to bite Paul Pogba on the shoulder. It wasn't a latch, but a nibble designed to provoke. Pogba screamed, but VAR cleared it. In the Premier League, his dark arts peaked in the 2021 Champions League final against Manchester City. Rudiger stepped into Kevin De Bruyne's path with a body check that fractured the playmaker's eye socket. It was a cynical, game-winning obstruction. Rudiger is the Joker of modern football, proving that chaos is a valid defensive strategy and leaving a legacy of broken spirits and fractured orbital bones. Diego Simeone. Before he was the manager in black patrolling the touchline, Diego Simeone was the snarling dog of the midfield. He was a player fueled by high-octane spite, combining technical Argentine flair with the ruthlessness of a hitman. He didn't just want to win the ball, he wanted to dominate the man. His methodology was psychological entrapment. Simeone was an expert at winding opponents up. He would tackle hard, whisper insults, and then collapse under the slightest touch to get rivals sent off. He weaponized the rules of the game against those too naive to understand them. The masterpiece of his cunning is legendary. World Cup 1998. After clattering into David Beckham from behind, Simeone lay on the ground. When Beckham petulantly flicked his leg out, Simeone reacted as if he'd been shot. He gestured frantically to the referee, selling the assault. Beckham saw red. Simeone smirked. It was the ultimate act of villainous intelligence. In Serie A, he engaged in a years-long war with Juventus, famously scoring and antagonising the Turin crowd with obscene gestures. Simeone was the Machiavelli of the pitch, proving that football is 10% skill and 90% mental warfare. Giorgio Chiellini, the smiling assassin. Giorgio Chiellini was a throwback to the old guard of Italian defending, a man who celebrated a clearance like a goal and treated a foul like a warm hug. He was a master of the dark arts, but he executed them with a grin that was both disarming and terrifying. His methodology was the cynical embrace. Chiellini was an expert at shirt pulling, blocking, and using his hands to impede progress. He viewed the laws of the game as suggestions, often apologising to the referee while simultaneously standing on a striker's foot. The definitive image of his glorious villainy arrived in the Euro 2020 final against England, as Bukayo Saka broke away in the dying minutes, threatening a counter-attack. Chiellini didn't even try to run. He simply reached out, grabbed Saka by the collar, and yanked him backward like a ragdoll. It was the most blatant, cynical professional foul in history. He took the yellow card without complaint because he knew it saved the game. Chiellini is the villain you can't help but respect. He proved that dignity is secondary to the result, cementing his legacy as the smartest, most cynical brute to ever wear the black and white stripes. Felipe Melo, they called him the Pitbull, and rarely has a nickname been so apt. Felipe Melo was a midfielder who operated on the very edge of sanity. He combined Brazilian technique with the temperament of a cage fighter. He didn't just patrol the midfield, he declared martial law. His methodology was explosive violence. Melo was known for two-footed lunges, stamping, and initiating brawls. He didn't tackle to dispossess, he tackled to intimidate. The evidence of his madness is hard to narrow down, but his time in Turkey was defined by a specific incident in 2012. During a match against fierce rivals Besiktas, Melo flew into a tackle so reckless it sparked a riot. Fans stormed the pitch, and the match was abandoned, but his true villain peak was fighting his own teammate, Albert Riera, in training. Melo beat Riera so badly, the winger needed hospital treatment. Melo was benched, then reinstated, because he was simply too terrifyingly effective to drop. Melo's legacy is one of pure combustion, a player who could win you a title or start a civil war, often in the same week.